What if a film was so raw, so unflinching, that entire governments tried to erase it? In the 1990s, while Hollywood played it safe, a few fearless directors went all in, creating movies so shocking they sparked bans, riots, and outrage worldwide. These weren't edgy thrillers. They were cinematic grenades that polite society couldn't defuse. From banned reels to vanished prints, we're diving into 14 notorious exploitation films that push the limit and still make censors nervous today. Romper Stomper, 1992. Imagine a film so raw it feels like you've been shoved into a back alley brawl with no exit. That's Romper Stomper, Jeffrey Wright's explosive debut that dropped like a thunderclap in 1992. Set in Melbourne's gritty underbelly, it follows a gang of far-right extremists whose violent lifestyle begins to crumble when outsiders move into their neighborhood. The film doesn't glamorize their actions. It traps you in their chaos, forcing you to witness the ugly truth of Russia's hatred and self-destruction. Lead actor Russell Crowe delivers a performance so intense it launched his international career. But the real shock came after the credits rolled. Authorities in Malaysia banned it outright, calling it a threat to public order. Germany demanded heavy cuts, and New Zealand slapped it with strict age restrictions. Even in Australia, where it was made, screenings sparked protests and heated debates. Critics argued it was dangerously immersive. Supporters claimed it was a necessary mirror held up to society's darkest corners. What makes Romper Stomper so unsettling isn't just the physical confrontations. It's the psychological spiral of men who've built their identity on rage only to find it collapsing beneath them. The film's handheld camera work, gritty sound design, and lack of moral handholding create a suffocating realism that few movies dare to replicate. Decades later, it remains a lightning rod praised for its craft, condemned for its content, and forever etched in the annals of banned cinema. Love it or loathe it, you can't ignore it. And that's exactly why it was silenced in so many places. California, 1993. What happens when a road trip turns into a descent into human darkness? California answers that question with chilling precision. Released in 1993, this psychological thriller stars Brad Pitt in one of his earliest and most unnerving roles as Early Grace, a charming but deeply disturbed drifter who hitchhikes across the American Southwest with a couple of documentary filmmakers. On the surface, it's a simple journey, but beneath the desert sun, something far more sinister unfolds. The film's brilliance lies in how it lulls you into a false sense of security before pulling the rug out with quiet, methodical dread. Early isn't a cartoon villain, he's polite, observant, even poetic at times, but his fascination with death and control slowly reveals a mind that sees people as playthings. The film's most talked about scenes involve tense, wordless moments where violence simmers just below the surface, never fully exploding, but always threatening to. That restraint is what made it so controversial. In the UK, the British Board of Film Classification refused to grant it a home video certificate for years, citing its unrelenting atmosphere of menace. Ireland banned it outright upon release. Even in the US, some theaters quietly pulled it after audience complaints. Yet, California isn't exploitative for shock value. It's a character study wrapped in a travelogue, asking uncomfortable questions about curiosity, complicity, and the thin line between observer and participant. Director Dominic Sena crafts a world where beauty and brutality coexist, making the horror all the more believable. It's a film that doesn't shout, it whispers, and that whisper lingers long after the screen goes dark. No wonder so many wanted it silenced. Crash, 1996. Can obsession become art? That's the unsettling question at the heart of Crash. David Cronenberg's 1996 adaptation of J.G. Ballard's novel. Forget car chases and explosions. This film redefines what it means to be turned on by machinery trauma and the collision of flesh and metal. The story follows a group of individuals who find emotional and physical connection through staged car accidents, treating twisted steel and shattered glass as pathways to intimacy. It sounds bizarre, and it is, but Cronenberg presents it with such clinical detachment that it becomes hypnotic. Every frame is cold, sterile, almost surgical, turning human desire into something alien yet strangely logical. Upon release, the backlash was immediate. The UK banned it outright in 1997, with politicians calling it morally repugnant and beyond the bounds of acceptable cinema. Even Canada's Ontario Film Review Board blocked its theatrical run. Yet the film wasn't banned for graphic imagery, it was banned for its ideas. Crash doesn't show violence for thrills. It uses it as a lens to examine how modern life distorts human connection. The characters aren't villains, they're lost souls seeking meaning in a world where emotion has been replaced by sensation. Cronenberg, never one to shy from controversy, called it a love story. And in its own twisted way, it is. The film eventually returned to UK screens in 1999, uncut and unapologetic, sparking fresh debate. Critics who once condemned it began praising its bold vision. Today it's studied in film schools as a masterpiece of body horror and social commentary. But in the mid-90s, it was public enemy number one for censors who couldn't stomach its cold, metallic poetry. Sometimes the most dangerous films aren't the loudest, they're the ones that make you rethink everything you thought you knew about desire. Funny Games, 1997. What? If the villains in a horror movie knew they were in a movie and used that knowledge to toy with you, that's the nightmare fuel behind Funny Games. Michael Haneke's 1997 Austrian thriller that rewrote the rules of suspense. On the surface, it's a home invasion story. A vacationing family is held hostage by two polite young men in white gloves. But Haneke isn't interested in jump scares or gore. He's interested in you, the viewer. The film constantly breaks the fourth wall, with characters staring directly into the camera, asking if you're still watching, even rewinding scenes to deny you catharsis. It's not just unsettling, it's accusatory. Haneke forces you to confront your own appetite for on-screen suffering. Unsurprisingly, this approach didn't sit well with censors. Australia refused to classify it, effectively banning it for years. Several European countries demanded cuts, and U.S. distributors hesitated to release it widely. The film's power lies in its restraint. There's very little on-screen brutality, yet the tension is unbearable because you're made complicit. Every scream, every plea feels like it's happening in your living room, and Haneke won't let you look away. He once said he made the film to punish the audience for enjoying violence as entertainment. And it works. Funny Games isn't fun. It's a cold, calculated experiment in audience manipulation, and its legacy looms large over modern horror. Years later, Haneke remade it shot for shot in English, proving the message was universal. But the original remains the most potent and the most punished. Banned not for what it shows, but for what it makes you feel. Guilt, helplessness, and the uncomfortable truth that sometimes we watch horror not to be scared, but to feel safe in our own powerlessness. Necromantic 2, 1991. Few films have walked the line between art and taboo as precariously as Necromantic 2, Jörg Buttgereit's 1991 follow-up to his already infamous debut. Set in post-reunification Berlin, it tells the story of Monika, a young woman navigating grief, loneliness, and an unconventional relationship with someone who's no longer among the living. The film avoids explicit imagery, relying instead on suggestion, mood, and haunting visuals to convey its themes. But that didn't stop authorities from reacting with alarm. In Germany, the film was immediately confiscated under obscenity laws and remained banned for nearly 2 decades. Police seized copies, screenings were shut down, and Buttgereit faced legal scrutiny. What made it so threatening? Not violence, but its quiet refusal to conform to societal norms about love loss and the boundaries of human connection. Shot in stark black and white with a dreamlike pace, Necromantic 2, it feels more like a gothic poem than a horror film. There are no jump scares, no monsters, just a woman trying to find peace in a world that offers her none. Yet its very existence challenged moral. Guardians who saw it as a corruption of decency. International distributors refused to touch it. Film festivals blacklisted it. For years it circulated only through underground VHS tapes and whispered rumors. But time has been kinder. Modern critics now view it as a misunderstood work of avant-garde cinema, a meditation on isolation in a fractured society. Still, its legacy is defined by censorship. It wasn't banned for what it showed, but for what it implied, that human desire doesn't always follow the rules. And in the early 90s, that was enough to make it disappear. Tesis, 1996. What if the thing you're studying for a school project is watching you back? That's the chilling premise of Tesis Alejandro Amenabar's razor-sharp debut from 1996. A film that turned the camera on the audience and asked, "Why are you looking?" Set in a Madrid film school, it follows Angela, a graduate student researching on-screen violence, who stumbles upon a hidden collection of disturbing recordings that suggest someone on campus is recreating real-life tragedies for the screen. What starts as academic curiosity spirals into a nightmare where fiction and reality blur beyond recognition. Amenabar, only 24 at the time, crafts a thriller that's as intellectually sharp as it is viscerally tense. The film doesn't rely on jump scares. Instead, it builds dread through sound design editing, and the terrifying idea that the person behind the lens might be closer than you think. Upon release, Tesis sparked immediate controversy across Europe. While Spain embraced it as a national triumph, winning 7 Goya Awards, other countries weren't so welcoming. Italy demanded cuts to its most intense sequences, and several Eastern European nations restricted its home video release, fearing it would inspire copycat behavior. The irony? Tesis is actually a critique of voyeurism, not an endorsement. It questions why we're drawn to dark content and whether consuming it makes us complicit. The film's climax, a masterclass in suspense, doesn't offer easy answers, just a lingering unease that sticks like static on your skin. Decades later, its themes feel even more relevant in an age of viral videos and digital desensitization. Tesis wasn't banned for being gory, it was feared for being too perceptive, and sometimes the clearest mirror is the one we're most afraid to look into. Audition, 1999. At first glance, Audition seems like a gentle romance, lonely widower, quiet courtship, soft piano music. But don't be fooled. By the time the needles come out, it's too late to look away. Released in 1999, Takashi Miike's slow-burn masterpiece begins as a melancholic drama about a man holding fake casting calls to find a new partner. He meets Asami, a poised, mysterious woman with a tragic past, and their relationship unfolds with dreamlike calm. Then, without warning, the film shifts gears into one of the most unforgettable descents into psychological horror ever put on screen. Miike, known for his wild genre, experiments, exercises shocking restraint here, letting tension build through silence, glances, and the unbearable weight of what's left unsaid. When the truth finally erupts, it's not with chaos, but with chilling precision. The film's final act became legendary not for its visuals, but for the sheer emotional brutality of its storytelling. Unsurprisingly, censors took notice. Singapore banned it outright. The UK initially required heavy edits for home release, and Australia slapped it with strict classification. Yet, Audition contains almost no explicit imagery. Its power lies in implication, in the horror of realization. Miike forces you to sit with discomfort, to question your assumptions about love control and justice. Western audiences used to clear heroes and villains were left reeling. Was Asami a victim, a predator, or something in between? The film refuses to simplify. That ambiguity is what made it so dangerous to authorities. It didn't tell you how to feel. It made you feel everything at once. Today, Audition is hailed as a modern classic, but in the late 90s, it was treated like contraband. A reminder that sometimes the quietest films scream the loudest. Singapore Sling, 1990. If David Lynch and Alfred Hitchcock ever conspired to make the strangest detective story imaginable, Singapore Sling would be their fever dream. This Greek cult film begins like a noir mystery, a private investigator searching for a missing woman, but it quickly spirals into something far more disturbing and surreal. Director Nikos Nikolaitis drenches every frame in black and white decay, turning the film into a gothic hallucination where obsession, grief, and madness blur together. The story unfolds almost like a nightmare, cyclical, hypnotic, and suffocating. There are moments of absurd humor followed by scenes so bleak they feel like punishment. Audiences expecting conventional storytelling didn't stand a chance. Screenings were banned or cut in multiple countries, and critics called it the most dangerous film you've never heard of. Yet beneath its shock value lies a strange poetic logic, an indictment of loneliness, control, and the cruelty that festers behind closed doors. Singapore Sling isn't easy to watch, and that's the point. It traps you in its atmosphere and refuses to let go. Over time, it's become a whispered legend among cult film fans, a relic from a decade when art dared to test every limit. Grim, stylish, and defiantly weird. It's the kind of movie that makes you question where cinema ends and madness begins. Dust Devil, 1992. set against the sun-scorched deserts of Namibia. Dust Devil isn't just a horror film, it's a fever dream wrapped in myth, politics, and blood-red sunsets. Directed by Richard Stanley in 1992, the film blends African folklore with serial killer tropes to create something entirely unique, a supernatural thriller where the monster isn't just a man, but a force of nature feeding on despair. The story follows a drifter known only as the Dust Devil who lures travelers to their doom, and a local officer racing to stop him before more lives are lost. But this isn't your standard cat-and-mouse chase. Stanley infuses every frame with spiritual dread, drawing from real Namibian legends about shapeshifters who punish the wicked. The result is a film that feels ancient and modern at once. Despite its artistic ambition, Dust Devil faced immediate censorship hurdles. In South Africa, where it was partially filmed, it was banned upon completion, with officials citing cultural insensitivity and disturbing imagery. The UK version was hacked down by over 20 minutes, stripping away much of its mythic texture. Stanley himself disowned the theatrical cut, calling it a ghost of what it was meant to be. Only years later, with the release of his director's cut, did audiences see his true vision, a haunting meditation on guilt, colonialism, and the land's memory. The film's visual style, drenched in amber light, swirling dust, and eerie silence, creates an atmosphere so thick you can taste it. And the Dust Devil himself, less a killer, more a consequence. Dust Devil was too poetic for horror fans, too violent for art house crowds, and too culturally complex for censors. No wonder it vanished for a while. But like the legends it draws from, it refused to stay buried. Man Bites Dog, 1992. What if the camera didn't just record evil, but became part of it? That's the terrifying core of Man Bites Dog, the 1992 Belgian mockumentary that turned the documentary format inside out. The film follows a film crew as they document Ben, a charismatic, articulate hitman who casually discusses his work between philosophical rants and dark humor. At first, they're just observers. But as the days pass, they start helping him, holding lights, scouting locations, even participating. The line between journalist and accomplice dissolves in real time. Shot in stark black and white with handheld cameras, the film feels disturbingly real, like found footage you weren't meant to see. Its genius and its danger lies in how it implicates the viewer. Are you watching for truth, for thrills, or just because you can't look away? Censors around the world panicked. Sweden banned it entirely. Canada required heavy edits, and the UK delayed its video release for years, citing moral harm. Yet the film contains almost no graphic scenes. Its horror is psychological, ethical, existential. Directors Rémi Belvaux, André Bonzel, and Benoit Poelvoorde, who plays Ben, made it on a shoestring budget using their own apartments and friends as crew. They wanted to expose the complicity of media, and by extension, the audience in normalizing violence. The film's final act is a gut punch. As the crew's involvement deepens the tone, shifts from dark comedy to tragic inevitability. Man Bites Dog isn't about a killer. It's about how easily we become part of the story we're watching. And in an age of true crime podcasts and viral outrage, its message has only grown louder. No wonder so many tried to silence it. Some truths are too sharp to be shown in broad daylight. The Baby of M&acirc, 1993, banned and censored across Europe. Peter Greenaway's The Baby of M&acirc is the kind of film that made entire festivals squirm. Set during the plague years in Renaissance France, it begins like a stage play, but quickly becomes a ruthless allegory about power, corruption, and blind faith. The story follows a woman who fakes a virgin birth in a desperate bid for influence. What starts as a miracle turns into a grotesque spectacle when the church nobility and commoners all claim ownership of the holy child. Every scene drips with theatrical excess, velvet robes, candlelight, and ritualized cruelty. Yet Greenaway's camera keeps it cold and deliberate, daring viewers to question their own fascination with sanctity and spectacle. When it premiered at Cannes, critics were divided between calling it genius and unwatchable. Several countries banned or heavily censored it, not for explicit content alone, but for its relentless assault on institutional hypocrisy. The film was nearly impossible to find for years, circulating only through late-night art house screenings and grainy imports. Over time, The Baby of M&acirc has been re-evaluated as one of Greenaway's boldest works, a film that exposes how easily moral outrage becomes another form of entertainment. Visually stunning and emotionally suffocating, it isn't just shocking for shock's sake, it's a mirror held up to a society that confuses holiness with spectacle. Tokyo Decadence, 1992. Beneath the neon glow of Tokyo's nightlife lies a world few tourists ever see, and Tokyo Decadence pulls back the curtain with unflinching clarity. Released in 1992 and directed by Ryu Murakami, writing under the pseudonym Tenkawa, the film follows Ai, a young office worker who moonlights as an escort for the city's ultra-wealthy elite. What unfolds isn't a crime thriller or a revenge tale, but a slow, dreamlike descent into emotional isolation and psychological unraveling. Shot in cool blues and sterile whites, the film avoids sensationalism, instead focusing on Ai's internal journey as she navigates encounters that range from oddly tender to deeply unsettling. The power of Tokyo Decadence lies in its restraint. It shows very little, yet implies everything. That subtlety didn't protect it from censors. Banned in several Asian countries upon release, it was labeled morally corrupting and damaging to public order. Even in Japan, theaters screened it discreetly often, with age restrictions and limited advertising. Western distributors hesitated, unsure how to market a film that defied genre and refused to offer judgment. But that's precisely its strength. Tokyo Decadence isn't condemning its characters. It's observing them with the same detached curiosity you might give to insects under glass. The film's episodic structure mirrors Ai's fragmented sense of self, and its haunting electronic score by Ryuichi Sakamoto adds to the sense of floating through a beautiful broken dream. Over time, it gained recognition as a bold feminist work not for its plot, but for its refusal to shame its protagonist. Ai isn't a victim or a villain. She's a person trying to survive in a system that values her only for what she can provide. In a decade full of loud, flashy exploitation, Tokyo Decadence whispered, and that whisper got it banned. Cure, 1997. Imagine a killer who never lifts a finger, and yet people keep dying. That's the chilling hook of Kure Kiyoshi Kurosawa's 1997 psychological thriller that redefined horror without relying on ghosts' gore or jump scares. Set in a rain-soaked Tokyo, the film follows a detective investigating a string of murders where the perpetrators have no memory of their actions and no motive. The only clue? A mysterious drifter with a calm voice and a knack for asking unsettling questions. As the detective digs deeper, reality itself begins to fray. Cure operates on dread, not shock. Scenes linger just a beat too long. Conversations feel off-kilter. The city becomes a character, empty, echoing, haunted by something unseen. Upon release, the film baffled many, but terrified those who got it. While not officially banned in most countries, it faced heavy censorship in parts of Southeast Asia, where authorities feared its themes of mind control and suggestion could influence vulnerable viewers. Even in Japan, some TV broadcasts edited key sequences, softening its ambiguous ending. But Cure's real power is its restraint. There's almost no on-screen violence, just the aftermath, the silence, the weight of what's been done. Kurosawa uses empty hallways, flickering lights, and distant sirens to build an atmosphere so thick it feels like breathing fog. The film asks, what if evil isn't a person, but an idea, and once planted, it spreads like a virus? Decades later, Cure is seen as a masterpiece of slow-burn horror, influencing everything from The Ring to modern psychological thrillers. But in the late 90s, it was too quiet, too strange, too intelligent for mainstream comfort. Sometimes the most brutal films aren't the ones that show you blood, they're the ones that make you question your own thoughts. Salo, or The 120 Days of Sodom, 1975. Yes, it was made in the 1970s, but Salo didn't vanish after its release. Throughout the entire 1990s, this film remained one of the most forbidden objects in global cinema, banned in over a dozen countries and illegal to possess in others. Directed by Pier Paolo Pasolini, Salo, Transplants, the Marquis de Sade's infamous novel into the final days of Mussolini's puppet regime, where 4 fascist elites kidnap teenagers and subject them to escalating acts of psychological and physical cruelty. But here's the twist. Pasolini doesn't show explicit brutality. Instead, he uses symbolism, ritual, and cold clinical framing to create a film that feels like watching a nightmare through a museum display case. The horror isn't in the action, it's in the silence, the stillness, the absolute dehumanization. The UK didn't lift its ban until 2000. Australia kept it locked away until 2002. In Ireland, owning a copy could land you in legal trouble well into the late 90s. Why? Because Salo isn't entertainment, it's an indictment. Pasolini himself, a Marxist, made the film as a final furious statement against power corruption and the commodification of human beings. Every frame is deliberate, every gesture loaded with meaning. The victims never scream. They stare blankly, already gone. That emotional void is what makes the film so unbearable and so important. Critics have called it the most pessimistic film ever made, and maybe they're right. But Pasolini didn't make it to shock. He made it to warn. And for 2 decades, the world chose to cover its eyes. Only now do we realize the real horror isn't the film itself, it's how much of it still feels familiar. And there it is, the full list of 14 films that dared to go too far, only to be erased from view. These weren't just movies, they were messages in bottles tossed into a storm, some lost, some recovered decades later. If your perspective just shifted, drop a comment below. What film shocked you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into cinema's hidden corners. And ask yourself this: when a story gets banned, is it because it's dangerous, or because it's true?